Hi, my name is Jeffrey, and today I'd like to talk about the best paramotor for you. There's no such thing as the best or a perfect paramotor. They all have goods and bads, pros and cons. When I first decided to get into this sport, I must have spent months and months researching on the internet. I ended up attending several large events, and I talked to a lot of people in the sport. And that's what helped me come to these conclusions and these kind of criteria that I use to pick the best paramotor for me. I'd like to make a disclaimer here. I'm no expert, I'm no professional, I don't do this for a living, I don't work for any company, and I'm not an aeronautical engineer, but neither are most of the people who design and build paramotors today. Paramotors are the cheapest form of aviation, but they still cost real money. This is not chump change we're dealing with here. And so for us to make a good, sound decision is definitely going to pay off in dividends in the long run. One of the first questions I had to ask myself really had more to do with my health than a paramotor. Be honest, assess your health. If you're in good health, maybe you want a foot launch. If you're not in good health, don't give up, don't be discouraged. There's a lot of great trike options out there. For me, I'm 52 years old. I have a bad back and chicken legs, and so the thought of me toting around 50 to 70 pounds worth of paramotor on my back really didn't sound all that fun to me. Now my son, however, he's 21, strong as a mule, and so foot launching was really the only way that he wanted to go. Don't be discouraged. Either way, you get a great experience and you can have a lot of fun. I've actually seen 70-year-olds foot launch before. I was really amazed at how well they did. But don't let your ego get in the way of you making a decision. Now, one of the biggest misconceptions that I had early on was I'm going to strap this thing on my back and I'm going to have to run with 50 to 70 pounds of weight just pounding my backbone to be able to take off. And that's really not 100% true. As soon as you pull the wing up and that wing comes overhead, it's going to lift a lot of that weight off your body. So you're not running with all of this weight just sitting on your back and your shoulders and of course driving through your backbone and your kneecaps. So keep that in mind as well. Another thing I can't stress enough is to get good training. I know there's a lot of guys, there's even Facebook groups out there and YouTube videos that talk about self-training. I'm not saying it's impossible. I actually know a guy who's self-trained and he did well, but he hasn't really stuck around in the sport very long. I've been called cheap before, and of course a lot worse things as well. I'm really more a value for the dollar kind of guy. And when it comes to training, I think it's money well spent. You can spend a whole lot more money on broken equipment, medical bills, time out of work, and of course funeral bills. And so I think training is a really important thing. I recommend that you talk around, look around, try to find a trainer, hopefully in your area, somebody close by who you can lean on and rely on in the future. But ask, research, talk, but I encourage you to find good training. It's definitely money well spent. So let's talk paramotor. There's basically 4 different pieces that we're going to talk about today. Number 1 being the engine itself. We're also dealing with a harness. We'll show on the front. We're talking about the hoop and the frame system. And we're also talking about swing arms, which is actually kind of part of the frame, but we're going to talk about those separately. Now the engine is the easy part. If you look around anywhere on the internet and start talking about paramotors, you're going to run across the name Vittorazzi. They're an Italian engine manufacturer who's been in the paramotor engine business for quite some time. They make an Atom 80, which is a small 80cc engine. They also make the Moster 185, and they also make a Cosmos 300, which is a lot larger water-cooled engine. It's usually more suitable for trikes and such. The Moster 185 is probably the most popular engine on the market. Now notice I didn't say best. There's a lot of other good engines out there, I'm sure of. But the Moster 185 being the most popular means that there's lots and lots of these things out on the market. People are using them. So what we're dealing with is something that's proven, it's reliable, and it's powerful. Now the only issue that I've ever seen people talk about much is having a cracked exhaust pipe on these things. And Moster Vittorazzi pretty much addressed that, I think, back in 2020 when they came up with a new exhaust. But the reality of it is, when people get on the internet and they go to complaining, you're going to see a lot of that kind of stuff. And as with many engines that are out there on the market, I think some of the complaints are probably really tiny in the overall scheme of things. There's tons of information, tons of tuning information, the parts availability, the service that's available for the Vittorazzi engine is just unmatched and unparalleled in the industry. Now, I do understand, I'm sure there's lots of other good engines out there, so don't let that be a huge discouragement to you, but I do encourage you to do your research. But at the end of the day, this is a no-brainer. Don't overthink this thing. Now, if you're a lightweight pilot, in my opinion, if you're 100 pounds soaking wet, maybe try out the Atom 80. It may be for you. But I've seen 120 to 150 pound pilots easily launch the Moster 185. And with that kind of weight, the climb out is just incredible with the power this engine produces. And of course, if you're a heavier pilot, the Moster is going to be a necessity for you. And of course, it still gives great performance and great climb out. Now, one of the options that you do have from some companies, but not all, is a propeller. Helix is a big propeller name, also E-prop. Now, I actually had a choice here on my particular unit, and I ended up going with the Helix propeller. I believe, if I'm correct, that the E-prop actually made a little more thrust than the Helix. But what helped me make my decision as a beginner was that the edges are not quite as sharp on the Helix propeller than it is on the E-prop. So if I ever got lines tangled up in my engine, I'm less likely to damage or cut a line with the Helix than I am with the E-prop. And that's the reason that I went in this direction. Now, one of the things I'll also encourage you to do is to educate yourself. If you don't know anything about engines, don't be scared away. These things are really simple. There's a lot of good information out on the internet. But if you take the time to learn how a two-stroke works, how it operates, and of course read all the manuals that come with your engine, it's definitely going to make life a whole lot easier for you in the long run. Stay tuned as we turn this paramotor around, and we're going to talk about the harness next. The next thing to consider is also an easy one, the harness. The harness is your interface between your body and the paramotor. Is how you strap in and how you connect yourself to the rest of the paramotor. Now, there's only a handful of companies in the world who are making harnesses, and all of them are reputable companies. So any harness that you get is probably going to be a safe bet. What I like to look for when I was looking for a harness on a paramotor was I want to see one that's got a lot of padding in the shoulders, padding in the back, and also a nice, comfortable, foldable seat board. I also look for storage pockets. There's a huge storage pocket underneath here. There's also a side storage pocket if you need to put any kind of tools, cell phone, a bottle of water. You've got storage available in your harness. Another thing this harness comes with is a reserve pouch built in. Not all harnesses come with a reserve pouch. A lot of times that's extra money that you have to buy when ordering a reserve, and you add it on to your harness. This one, of course, came included with a reserve bag as well. But all in all, the most important thing that you need to take away from this is choosing the right size for you. There's great resources on the internet that you can look at to see your height and your body weight and what size harness that you need to get when you order your paramotor. The next thing we're going to talk about are swing arms. Just to be clear, swing arms are usually proprietary to a particular frame. You don't order a frame, then order a swing arm separate. So when you order a frame, you're also choosing the swing arms that come with it. This particular one, I actually did have an option between a one-piece or a multi-piece swing arm. And here I went with the multi-piece designs. What I'm looking for in swing arms and what criteria I used to choose the best paramotor for me was strength. I was looking for adjustability. And also, the most important thing was how these swing arms attached to the frame. Now, for me, it may be just a mental thing. Growing up, seeing tubular aluminum lawn chairs fold up when you sat in them, and seeing how that aluminum creased and broke. I'm just not a fan of tubular swing arms. Now, I do realize that some are made out of titanium, even some have gusset bracing underneath to give it more strength. But there's just some kind of mental block there that a tubular swing arm is just not my thing. And because of this, I was able to eliminate a lot of frames for my consideration because they only came with tubular swing arms. Now, what I prefer are a billet aluminum type swing arm. I think that's where you're going to get a lot of your strength from. Also, billet aluminum swing arms have a lot of holes in them for adjustability. So when you're adjusting your hang points, it's just a matter of removing the screw and sliding those hang points and bolting it back down in the proper position. Whereas on tubular swing arms, it's kind of a rough guess. You're literally sliding a collar up and down that tubular arm, hoping you're in the right spot when you're setting your hang points with that as well. One of the biggest things that I eliminated a lot of frames with also was the swing arm attachment points. How this swing arm ties into the frame, that's a very critical point, and I think that's something that most people overlook or just don't pay attention to. In my research, I saw several frames where they just had what literally was just a large flat washer spot welded in two little spots, and that's where the swing arm attached. And that just didn't give me a lot of confidence in the strength of that connection. I've also seen tubular mounts where there's a tube running out the side of the frame, no bracing or anything, and the swing arm just screws into the end of that tube. In my mind, there's a lot of leverage that could be placed on that, which could easily, bend or break that swing arm attachment point off. So that also didn't give me a whole lot of confidence in it either. What I was looking for was a large mounting area. I wanted to see something substantial. I wanted to see full wells all the way around. And I also wanted to see an aviation style bolt, a large bolt preferably, to hold that swing arm attachment to the frame. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is the frame. And the frame entails a lot of different things, and there's a lot of different variables we're going to have to consider here. The first thing and the first question that I'm going to lead you into to ask yourself is, what is the frame made out of? There's basically 4 different materials that frames are made out of in the paramotor world, and starting from the least expensive to the most expensive, we're talking about aluminum, stainless steel, titanium, and then carbon fiber. Now, for the sake of this discussion, we're going to just completely eliminate carbon fiber off the table. Only a couple of companies making carbon fiber paramotors out on the market. They're very expensive. They were completely out of my budget range. But they're also kind of geared more towards the advanced pilot. And here I am, a newbie, trying to choose the right paramotor for me to get started with. Maybe that's something I can consider later in my paramotor career, but for right now, we're not going to discuss carbon fiber. Now, the other 3 that we have left remaining, which would be aluminum, stainless steel, and titanium. Let's talk about some of the pros and cons of each of the different materials. Aluminum is going to be your lightest weight. It's also going to be your least expensive, usually. The cons are going to be that it's also the weakest when it comes to strength. And if you have an accident and you bend the frame and you tweak it a little bit, trying to bend aluminum back into its correct shape probably is not going to end well. Now, if it's something minor, you may get away with it, but it's not going to give me a lot of confidence that once that frame is bent and I bend it back, that I'm going to still have the same strength retained there in that. The next step up is stainless steel. Now, stainless steel may be a little more expensive, usually not much. Stainless is definitely going to be heavier than aluminum, but it's also a lot stronger than aluminum. And there are a few companies out there making hybrids where they combine a stainless steel mid-frame where the engine mounts and an aluminum hoop. And there's also options where they're completely stainless steel. It just depends on what your needs are. The third material we're going to discuss is titanium. And that's my choice for my paramotor. Titanium gives you the best of both worlds between aluminum and stainless steel. You get the lightweight of aluminum, but with the strength of stainless steel and also the repairability. I'm able to bend titanium back into position, of course within reason, and still retain strength. And so titanium is my route, and that's what I decided to go with. The difference in money, which would be a con for titanium, is so minimal that it just wasn't worth arguing over. And so we went titanium on our particular frame. Another thing that I considered when making my decision was the Paramotor Geometry. Now, Scout Paramotors does a great job of explaining geometry on several of their YouTube videos, and I'll try to post a link down in the description, so if you're interested in that, you can look at it and read it. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel here. Most modern paramotors are all using a really similar geometry, and what I mean by that is the thrust line of the engine. I also mean where the hang points are. That's consider how the swing arms are attached to the frame. Is it up high or is it down low? So those are all things to consider. I encourage you not to waste your time like I did chasing that rabbit hole about geometry. Most all modern paramotors are going to be real similar in that respect. Now, if you see a paramotor and it looks like it was made in the 60s, it could be an older design, you definitely might want to dig around a little bit and consider that also. Another thing to consider is the hoop. Now, this thing looks really simple. It's just a round piece of tubing there, but there's a lot going on with the hoop that you do need to take in consideration when choosing a paramotor. The first thing that you want to think about is the strength of the hoop. Now, when I first started looking, I noticed there's some designs that have a double hoop system. Instead of just one hoop, there was a secondary hoop behind that with bracing. And in my mind, I thought, well, that really sounds like a great idea. I think I want to go with a double hoop. And the more research and more digging and more learning, I figured out that the majority of double hoop setups are aluminum tubing. And an aluminum hoop sometimes requires that extra hoop just to gain the same strength that you can get out of a single hoop setup of titanium or stainless steel. So once I kind of figured that out, then I felt a lot more comfortable about a single hoop. Now, some paramotor manufacturers also give you the option of a hoop size. My particular one here has a little bit larger hoop than some manufacturers, and I'm able to run a little larger prop because of that larger hoop, and that meant something to me, and I'll touch on that later in the video. So the hoop strength is a real thing. This hoop flexing, if you can see in grabbing this hoop and pulling back on it, if this hoop flexes and bends enough to where it can make contact to the propeller, then that's going to cause a bad day. And so on my particular one here, I even ran a spacer behind the prop, which pushed the prop back another 25 millimeters or an inch, because I was also using this unit on a trike, and I wanted to make sure that I had plenty of distance between the prop and the hoop. I also looked for hoops that had some area out here. The propeller was not at the very edge, and that was just for safety concerns, as also as far as my lines on my wing getting close. I wanted to make sure that I had some margin there of safety to consider as well. Another thing that I spent way too much time looking for was how the net attaches to the frame. And manufacturers use different methods to attach the netting to the frame itself. And so this is pretty much a time versus money type situation. Some companies use like a snap-on hoop that holds the net, and you can just peel that net on and off in just a matter of seconds. And that works great for convenience, especially if you're going to take this thing apart, break it down, then that works great. The problem with that is that net's probably over $300. So if you tear up the net, then it's going to cost you, but it's only going to take you a few seconds to replace it. This particular net uses a pretty common practice in the industry of rivets. And so definitely a whole lot cheaper to replace money-wise, but it's going to cost you in time. Time to take and drill out each rivet, put the new net on, and of course re-rivet it back into place. So do consider those things to whichever appeals to you more, time versus money. Another thing that I considered was portability. Now fortunately for me, this wasn't something that weighed heavy on my decision. We own trucks, trailers, have a big garage, and most all of my landing zones, my LZs, are really close by. So transportation and portability really just wasn't a huge issue for myself. But I fly with guys who break their paramotors completely down every trip that they make. And whether you live in a small apartment or don't have a garage, or you're owning a compact car and don't have a truck bed to transport in, then that's definitely something to consider, how easy or how difficult the paramotor breaks down. So do consider that also. Now, the next thing that I was looking at in the frame was the shape of the bottom of the frame. Now, it may sound trivial. Can you see there in the picture? Hold the camera down. The way the bottom of the frame is shaped was something that, I don't know, common sense just kind of drove me to. If you're ever going to butt land, if you watch enough YouTube videos, you've seen accidents happen and people butt land. Their feet get kicked out in front of them, the bottom of the frame comes down and makes contact with the ground. And I've seen quite a few paramotors where the bottom of the frame is shaped like a plow. It comes to a point almost. And so in my mind, if I ever butt landed this thing and that bottom of that frame dug into the ground, it's going to hurt. And so I was thinking about physical injury more so than anything else. But a rounded bottom, to me, in my simple mind, seems to act like a skid. So in the event of a butt landing, if I landed flat on the ground, that rounded bottom would skate across the ground or slide across the ground instead of digging in. And so that meant something to me as well. So if we're going to go back and review, if we're going to consider what material the frame is made out of, whether it's aluminum, stainless steel, or titanium, we need to consider the hoop as far as the strength, the portability of it, how the neck, and of course the shape at the bottom of the frame. We're also going to consider how the swing arms are attached to the frame. And so we're looking for something there that's strong, that's durable, that gives us some confidence and peace of mind. And if you consider all of this, then we're headed in the right direction for us to make a really good decision on the best paramotor for you. Another couple of small details I'd like to leave you with is don't get bogged down with all the small details. It's just not worth it. I spent a lot of time and a lot of energy and just fretting and worrying over little small stuff that really just didn't amount to much. Kind of like salt on popcorn. You know, if you've never had it, you really just don't know what you're missing. Another thing is don't overcomplicate things in the beginning. If you're a beginner, there's always so much to think about already. You're going to be task saturated, and so you don't need to worry about cutting on a GoPro camera or things of that nature. Also, I didn't bother with an electric start. I considered an electric start, but after doing a lot of reading and a lot of research, it's just one more thing to break, to tear up, to overcomplicate the situation, and it really just doesn't bring a lot of value to the table, especially for the extra money that you're going to spend. I've been called cheap, of course a lot worse things as well, you know, but the last thing that you should be concerned with when deciding on a paramotor is price. Now, we all have a budget, and I understand that, but I'm really more of a value for the dollar kind of guy. If you cheap out now in the beginning, it can really cost you a whole lot more money in the long run. So do keep that in mind also. When I used all the criteria that we've talked about, it kind of led me to one conclusion, and that's a Power2Fly Titan. Is it perfect? No, none of them are, as I stated at the beginning of the video. But the Titan checked off the most boxes of anything else on the market that fit my needs and my criteria. We're going to do a review of the Titan in a later video, and I hope you stick around and check that video out. We'll leave some links down in the comments and description section for you to link to that. If you have any questions on any Power2Fly products, I would encourage you to reach out to Darren Locklear or Alan Surratt at Carolina PPG. I'll make sure that I leave all the information for them with telephone numbers, websites, email addresses, so you can get in contact with those guys. They have been really, really great to work with, and so look up that information. Also, I'd ask that you please like and subscribe to a video channel to help us to grow so we can do more videos like this. And we've got a comment section down below. If you got any comments, questions, concerns, if we did it right, we did it wrong, don't hesitate. Leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you. So thanks for watching the video, and I hope it was helpful, and have a blessed day.